I never thought I'd say it out loud. Sitting across from Daniel at our polished oak dining table, I felt my heart pounding in my chest. The soft glow of the chandelier above us made everything seem almost too perfect, like a scene from a movie where nothing bad ever happens. But something bad was about to happen. I took a deep breath, my fingers trembling as I ran them along the stem of my wine glass. I had rehearsed this moment in my head 100 times, but now that it was here, the words felt heavy, dangerous. I want to sleep with a black man. The silence that followed was deafening. Daniel blinked. Once, twice. His fork, still speared through a bite of grilled chicken, hovered in midair. His jaw clenched, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed whatever words had first come to his mind. I saw the flicker of shock in his hazel eyes, the way his whole body stiffened like I had just stabbed him instead of spoken. "What did you just say?" he asked, his voice quieter than I expected. I swallowed hard. "I've been thinking about it for a while." Daniel set his fork down. Slowly, deliberately. He folded his hands together, his knuckles turning white. "And what does that mean, exactly?" I exhaled sharply. "I don't know. It's just. I've always been curious. And lately, I've felt this need to explore something new. Something different." His eyes darkened. "Something different? You mean someone different?" I nodded, unable to meet his gaze. "Yes." The weight of the word hung between us like a loaded gun. "I'm Jessica Carter, 35 years old, married for 10 years, and living in a beautiful home in Texas with a husband who loves me. By all accounts, I should have been happy. But happiness is a strange thing. Sometimes, what looks perfect on the outside can feel hollow on the inside." Daniel and I met in college. He was the dependable, steady type, the guy who held the door open, paid for dinner, and always made sure I felt safe. He was a good man. A loyal husband. But over the years, the fire between us had dimmed. Our days had become routines. Mornings filled with rushed coffee and hurried kisses, nights spent watching TV in separate corners of the couch. Our intimacy was mechanical, predictable, almost scripted. And then, one day, the thought entered my mind. What would it be like to be with someone completely different? Someone who didn't know my habits, my patterns, my past? That thought turned into a fantasy. And that fantasy turned into something I couldn't ignore. Daniel was the kind of man who believed in tradition. Monogamy. Commitment. He wasn't the type to entertain fantasies of straying. And I knew, without a doubt, that he had never considered being with another woman since the day he married me. Which made my confession all the more cruel. He pushed his plate away, leaning back in his chair, his gaze sharp. "So, what? You just woke up one day and decided our marriage wasn't enough for you." "It's not about that," I said quickly. "It's not that I don't love you. I do. But I feel like I'm missing something. Like I need to experience something before it's too late." His lips curled into a humorless smirk. "Before it's too late? Jesus, Jess. What are you even saying?" I looked down at my hands, twisting my wedding ring around my finger. "I don't know how to explain it. I just know that I've never done this and I want to." His voice was tight with anger. "And what exactly do you expect me to do with that information? Give you my blessing? Tell you to go out and have fun?" I winced. I wanted to be honest with you." "Honest," he repeated, laughing bitterly. "Right. Honest." Silence stretched between us. I could feel his eyes on me, studying me, trying to figure out if the woman sitting across from him was the same one he had built a life with. And the truth was, I wasn't. That night, Daniel barely spoke to me. He went to bed without kissing me goodnight, something he hadn't done in 10 years. I lay beside him, staring at the ceiling, my body buzzing with both fear and relief. I had said it. I had voiced the desire that had been gnawing at me for months. And now, there was no taking it back. The next morning, Daniel left early for work, his goodbye nothing more than a mumbled, "See you later." I sat alone at the breakfast table, staring at my untouched plate of eggs, wondering if I had just ruined everything. But a part of me, the part one was trying so hard to ignore, was also wondering what came next. Because now that the words were out there, I knew there was no stopping what was already in motion. And I wasn't sure I wanted to. I told myself I wouldn't act on it. That night, after I dropped the bombshell on Daniel, I lay in bed, promising myself that it was just a fantasy, something I had to say out loud to get it out of my system. But the problem with fantasies is that once they're spoken into existence, they don't disappear. They grow. And mine was growing faster than I could control. I met Malik Thompson at the gym. It started off innocent. I had been trying to get back into shape, mostly to shake off the restlessness that had taken over my life. Daniel had bought me a gym membership for my birthday 6 months ago, probably hoping I'd use it as a distraction instead of dwelling on what I felt was missing. Malik was one of the personal trainers there, tall, built like a damn superhero, with deep brown skin that glistened under the gym lights. He had a way of commanding attention without trying. Every woman in that place watched him, but he carried himself like he barely noticed. I noticed, and I hated how much I liked watching him. He was nothing like Daniel. Where my husband was calm and reserved, Malik was confident, playful. Where Daniel was soft-spoken, Malik had a voice that dripped with charm. He moved with an ease that made everything about him seem effortless. The first time we spoke, it was just casual gym talk. Form's a little off, he said one morning as I struggled with a squat. His voice was smooth, teasing. "You're gonna hurt yourself like that." I straightened up, flustered. "Oh, yeah, I'm still trying to figure it out." He smiled, white teeth flashing. "You want some help?" I hesitated. Not because I didn't want the help, but because I felt something shift inside me the moment he asked. "Sure," I said. Big mistake. Because once I let him into my space, there was no turning back. Malik started helping me with my workouts. At first, it was just normal training. Correcting my posture, adjusting my stance. But there was always something more beneath the surface, an energy neither of us acknowledged, but both of us felt. One morning, as he positioned my arms for a shoulder press, his hands brushed against mine. Just a touch. But it was enough. I looked up, and he was already watching me. "Better?" he asked, his voice lower than before. I nodded, my throat dry. "Yeah, better." From that moment on, I was hooked. I started going to the gym more often, dressing a little nicer, taking a little longer to get ready. And Malik noticed. "You're making progress," he told me one afternoon, leaning against a machine as I wiped sweat from my neck. "You've been putting in work." I smiled, feeling a rush of satisfaction. "Well, I've got a good trainer." He smirked. "You sure do." It was harmless flirting. Just words. Just looks. But deep down, I knew where this road was leading. At home, things with Daniel were tense. He hadn't brought up my confession again, but I could feel the distance between us growing. He didn't hold me as long when we kissed. He didn't ask how my day was. He was trying to pretend everything was normal, but we both knew it wasn't. And in that space, in that emptiness, my thoughts of Malik grew stronger. One night, after Daniel had fallen asleep, I found myself scrolling through social media, searching for Malik's profile. I found it easily, pictures of him at the gym, out with friends, living a life that felt so different from mine. So free. I hesitated for a second before hitting follow. Minutes later, a notification popped up. "Malik Thompson has followed you back." And just like that, the door had been opened. The next day, I went to the gym feeling different. Nervous. Excited. When I walked in, Malik was at the front desk, talking to another trainer. The moment he saw me, his face broke into a slow grin. "Look who finally followed me back," he said, teasing. I laughed, playing it off. Figured it was time. He studied me for a second, like he was trying to read between the lines. Then, he leaned in slightly. "You ever been to the Oak Room?" I frowned. "The bar downtown?" "Yeah. Me and some friends are going there tomorrow night. You should come." I hesitated. This was it. A clear choice. A moment I couldn't take back. "I don't know." I started, but the words felt weak, unconvincing. Malik tilted his head. "Come on. Just drinks. No pressure. Just drinks. Just drinks with a man I had been fantasizing about for weeks. Just drinks with someone who made me feel things I hadn't felt in years." I smiled. Maybe. And we both knew what that meant. I told myself it was just drinks. That's how I justified it when I stood in front of the mirror, applying mascara with a precision I hadn't cared about in years. It wasn't a date. It wasn't anything serious. Just drinks with a friend from the gym. At least, that's what I needed to believe. But deep down, I knew the truth. I knew it when I changed outfits 3 times before settling on a black dress that hugged me in just the right places. I knew it when I spritzed on perfume, making sure it was subtle yet intoxicating. I knew it when I stared at my reflection and saw someone I hadn't seen in years, a woman who wanted to feel wanted. I told Daniel I was meeting Lisa, my best friend, for dinner. He barely looked up from his laptop when he said, "Have fun." I should have felt guilty. Instead, I felt free. The oak room was dimly lit, with soft jazz playing over the hum of conversation. It was the kind of place where people went to disappear, where secrets were whispered over cocktails and stolen glances meant more than words. When I walked in, Ryan was already there, leaning against the bar with that effortless confidence that had drawn me to him from the start. His dark blue button-up was unbuttoned just enough to be dangerous, the sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. He looked up, saw me, and smiled. "Didn't think you'd actually come," he said, his voice teasing. I slipped onto the stool beside him, my heart racing. Neither did I. He ordered me a drink without asking, whiskey sour, my favorite. I hadn't told him that, but somehow he knew. We talked. About everything and nothing. About life, about marriage, about the things we wanted but never had the courage to say out loud. "You ever think about what life would be like if you made different choices?" he asked, swirling the ice in his glass. I exhaled, staring at the golden liquid in front of me. All the time. Ryan leaned in slightly, his voice dropping. "And do you ever want to stop thinking and just do?" The air between us shifted. It was heavy, electric. The kind of moment where one wrong move could ruin everything or change it forever. I should have gotten up. I should have walked away. Instead, I whispered yes. It started with a touch, his fingers brushing against my knee, a barely there graze that sent a shiver up my spine. I didn't pull away. He took it as permission. Ryan leaned in, so close I could feel his breath against my skin. He paused, giving me a chance to stop him. I didn't. Then his lips were on mine, and the world around us faded. The kiss was slow at first, hesitant, testing the waters. But when I melted into it, when my hands found his shirt and curled into the fabric, it deepened. Became something raw, something dangerous. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I heard a voice screaming at me to stop. But the louder voice? The one I had ignored for years? It told me to keep going. And I listened. I barely remembered leaving the bar. Ryan had offered to take me somewhere else, somewhere private. I had hesitated, the weight of what I'd already done pressing down on me. Not yet, I had told him. Not yet. But we both knew what not yet really meant. Now, driving home, my lips still tingling from his kiss, I gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. What had I just done? I had crossed the line. And there was no pretending otherwise. When I walked through the front door, Daniel was still on the couch, the soft glow of his laptop screen illuminating his face. "Hey," he said without looking up. "Hey," I whispered, my voice barely audible. I waited for him to sense it, for him to look at me and just know. But he didn't. And for the first time in our marriage, I realized how easy it was to lie. The affair had only just begun, but it already felt like it had consumed me. I had always imagined infidelity as something dramatic, something messy and overt. But in reality, it was a quiet thing. A collection of small choices, moments that added up like drops of water in a bucket, unnoticed until it overflows. At first, I kept telling myself that I was just indulging in a brief escape. That it wouldn't mean anything. That I could separate it from my life with Daniel. But the longer I saw Ryan, the more I found myself changing. We were careful at first. Each meeting with Ryan was an isolated event, a stolen moment of excitement in a world that had grown monotonous. We'd text during the day, and those simple messages became my lifeline. They were filled with subtle flirtations, innuendos I could never share with Daniel. Ryan was everything I craved, spontaneous, confident, and completely different from Daniel. He pushed me out of my comfort zone, challenging me in ways I had never imagined. I found myself dressing differently, walking with my head a little higher, feeling more alive than I had in years. One afternoon, after a particularly passionate workout session, Ryan suggested we get lunch. "Why don't we grab a bite? Just you and me, no gym talk." I hesitated, glancing around to make sure no one was watching. But I could already feel the thrill of doing something forbidden surging through me. "Okay," I agreed, my voice trembling slightly. We went to a small diner on the outskirts of town. The kind of place no one would recognize us in. We shared a booth, sitting closer than was necessary. His hand brushed against mine, and I didn't pull away. By the time the waitress brought our check, I was no longer able to deny the connection. This wasn't just physical. There was something deeper, something thrilling about being in his presence. I was playing with fire, but I couldn't stop. Every time I left Ryan, the guilt hit me like a tidal wave. I would drive home, my heart pounding in my chest, wondering how I could live with myself. How could I betray Daniel, the man who had been nothing but faithful to me for so long? But when I stepped through the front door, my guilt would quickly fade into something else, the numbness of routine. Daniel was always there, watching TV, working, and doing what he always did. He didn't see it. He didn't notice the change in me. It was as if I had become two people, one who loved her husband and another who was becoming addicted to the thrill of her affair. The affair wasn't about Ryan, or even about sex. It was about me, the woman I was rediscovering inside myself. The woman who had been buried under years of marriage and responsibility. Ryan gave me that freedom. But despite the rush of secret meetings, there was a nagging tension at home. Daniel started noticing the little things. The way I'd become quieter, the way I'd spend more time on my phone, the late nights at the gym that stretched into hours. One evening, after I had returned from yet another lunch with Ryan, Daniel sat me down at the kitchen table. His eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep, his voice calm but sharp. "Where were you today?" he asked, his tone more demanding than I'd ever heard it. I froze. My heart thudded painfully in my chest. "Just running errands," I said, a lie that tasted bitter on my tongue. He raised an eyebrow. "You've been running a lot of errands lately. Too many for me to keep track of." I swallowed, feeling the walls closing in around me. I wanted to confess. I wanted to tell him everything about Ryan, about the affair, about the feelings I was struggling with. But the words stuck in my throat. "Daniel, I started, but I couldn't finish." He sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Look, I don't know what's going on with you, but it feels like something's changed. You're distant. You're different. I just need to know if you're okay." I wanted to reach across the table, hold his hand, and tell him the truth. But I couldn't. Instead, I said, "I'm fine. Just tired, that's all." The next few weeks passed in a haze of guilt and excitement. Ryan and I continued our affair, each encounter more intense than the last. I wasn't just cheating on Daniel, I was betraying myself, becoming someone I barely recognized. Yet, each time Ryan touched me, I felt like I was finally awake. He made me feel seen in a way Daniel hadn't for years. Every stolen kiss, every whispered word, only deepened the rift between the woman I was with Daniel and the woman I was becoming with Ryan. The guilt didn't stop me. It only made the secret meetings feel more urgent, more dangerous. The moment you cross a line, you can never truly go back. I didn't understand that until it was too late. It had been weeks since I'd started seeing Ryan, and everything had begun to unravel. The guilt that once lurked in the background had grown louder, a constant companion, but still, I couldn't stop. Each stolen moment with him made me feel more alive, more free than I'd felt in years. But the price of that freedom was starting to show. Daniel had been distant, but not in the way I'd hoped. He was beginning to notice the cracks in our marriage, small things at first, but enough to make him question everything. He had always trusted me completely. But now I saw the doubt in his eyes, the way he watched me when I came home late or when I didn't answer my phone. And then, the day came when I couldn't keep up the charade any longer. It was a Wednesday evening. I had just come home from another lunch with Ryan, my heart racing, and the excitement still fresh in my veins. Daniel was in the living room, sitting in front of the TV. He didn't even look up when I entered. "Hey," I said, my voice shaky. "Hey," he replied, his tone flat, distant. "We need to talk." I froze. There was something in his voice that sent a chill down my spine. My stomach turned, and I knew, he knew. He stood up slowly, walking toward me, his eyes never leaving mine. "I know, Jessica." I felt a wave of panic surge through me. "What do you mean, you know?" "I know what's been going on," he said, his voice surprisingly calm. "I've been following the little things, the late nights, the quiet phone calls, the looks, the changes in you. And I've been avoiding the truth because I didn't want to face it, but I can't anymore." I opened my mouth to deny it, to try and explain myself, but the words wouldn't come. I couldn't lie to him anymore. Daniel continued, his voice shaking now with emotion. "I loved you. I trusted you. But I can't ignore this anymore. You're not the woman I married." I felt my chest tighten as I struggled to breathe. I had been caught. The facade I had built up so carefully was crumbling in front of me, and there was nothing I could do to stop it.